This is Jim Fetzer, your host on Authentic News, right here in RBN Live, this 19th day of May 2025. So much news. Russia promises to double down if Ukraine does not take the offer on the table. Margarita Simonyan tweets, story has been making rounds. Ukrainians were outraged when Russian negotiators said Ukrainian soldiers must leave the 4 new Russian regions as part of ceasefire, to which the Moscow delegation replied, next time it will be 5. Now our reporter in Istanbul got to ask the Russian side how it really went down. We didn't say 5, we said 8. This, of course, is in furtherance of the well-known Russian conditions, territorial concessions, minimally, of course, Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia, including now areas not actually under Russian control. Crimea, needless to say, already a done deal. NATO neutrality, sanctions release, demilitarization and denazification, protection of Russian-speaking citizens. These were all the reasons the war was fought. Meanwhile, Macron, Starmer blast unacceptable Russian stance as though they had anything to say about it. Zelensky in a phone call with President Trump, soon on the heels of the Istanbul meeting, would last in less than 2 hours, touted he's willing to take the fastest possible steps to bring real peace. But the West needs to hold a strong stance. Also on the call were leaders of Britain, France, Germany, and Poland. Zelensky, after the call, told reporters pressure on Russia must be maintained. What a joke. Our position: if the Russians reject a full and unconditional ceasefire and an end to killing, tough sanctions must follow. Kiev's top European ally blasted Russia. Their stance is presented in Istanbul as unacceptable. How absurd is that? The Russians hold all the cards. They can accept the Russian conditions or not. Meanwhile, here we have Colonel McGregor talking about Russia expanding to the Dnieper River if, in fact, they're of necessity. Here we go.
At some point, the General Staff would tell President Putin that it would be useful to be on the Dnieper River line, that you might as well just occupy and take all the territory up to that river line. It's a natural barrier. For hundreds and hundreds of years, it was the western frontier of Europe. Kiev, under the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, was a fortress of the West. Once you passed Kiev, once you passed that river, you were dealing with Tatars, Mongols, and Russians, That's it. So I think if I were on the Russian General Staff, that's what I would argue for. This is a defensible river line that gives us a buffer zone, if you will, and we are in a position to do whatever we need to against the western portion of Ukraine if it comes down to it. If anything's being demonstrated in this war, is that the strike capability, precision strike capability, whether it's a drone or cruise missile or, ballistic missile, theater ballistic or strategic, there's nothing they cannot hit and destroy. And if you occupy that river line and you are compelled at some point to cross it, well, you're already there. In other words, you're not moving from a few hundred miles back. You're right up on the river. And so if you have to stage in order to cross to extinguish whatever heinous regime comes to power in Kiev, although I don't think Zelensky will last much longer, and if he does, he's not going to be replaced by something worse. I think there'll be a more amenable group at some stage. But then you have that benefit. Now, the one thing that he can still do that he hasn't done is he can cross the river and attack from the north down into Odessa. Odessa historically was Russian, never Ukrainian. And if he did that, that would strangle Ukraine. It would have no outlet, would have difficulty shipping grain and other products from Western Ukraine to other countries. And it doesn't mean that the Russians could cut them off completely, but it would certainly put them in a position to do so. And it may be that the Russians decide to do that as a matter of self-defense. I don't know. I just think that the best thing that we can do is to get out, but no, I don't have any support for that here in Washington. Everyone in Washington, with very few exceptions, wants to fight until every Ukrainian is dead and everything is destroyed. And that Western Ukraine could be made to look like vast areas of Eastern Ukraine. I think that's catastrophic, but there's not much informed thinking about these matters in Washington. There's a lot of narcissism in the sense that our national policy is mortgaged to vanity. That we can't sign on for anything that we don't quote unquote impose. President Trump can't do anything that doesn't reflect on him as a great man and a victor and a winner.
I think Colonel McGregor's got it basically right. Meanwhile, Russia and Ukraine agree to a prisoner swap at the Istanbul meetings, but the ratio is like 27-1. Moscow and Kiev agreed to exchange 1,000 prisoners of war during Friday's peace. These are POWs. The first direct sit-down between a warring state in more than 3 years. Little progress was made toward a broader truce, however. Speaking of the meeting, Russia's chief negotiator, Vladimir Medinsky, said he was satisfied with the first round of talks in light of the prisoner swap deal, suggested the dialogue would resume in the future. We agreed each side will present its vision for the possible future ceasefire and write it out in detail. Once that's done and it's been discussed, we think it will be reasonable to continue our negotiations. Yes, we'll see how it goes. But there's utter intransigence on the side of Ukraine and the West. No realistic recognition of the fact that Russia has already won the war. Meanwhile, we have Russian prisoners turn out to need medical care after having been tortured in Ukraine. Going to Viktor Vodolotsky, the Russian serviceman currently in captivity in Ukraine, will be provided with highly skilled medical care and rehabilitation in hospitals of the South Military District and Moscow. Rostov-on-Don, May 16th. The Russian prisoners will be exchanged for Ukrainian prisoners following the talks between the countries in Turkey are currently in need of medical assistance. First Deputy Chairman of the State Duma Committee for CIS Affairs, Eurasian Integration and Relations with Expatriates, Viktor Voldonsky told TASS. Russia and Ukraine agreed during their first talks in 3 years to swap 1,000 captives. Very good. Meanwhile, as rumors of a new big offensive swirl, Putin puts in charge a new commander-in-chief that Ukraine had previously announced it had killed. While the peace negotiations between Russia and Ukraine are still showing a lot of promise, the war continues unabated. Top Russian negotiator Medvinsky quoted named French General Napoleon to say wars and negotiations take place at the same time. It seems the longer the conflict lasts, the more painful the territorial losses of the Kiev regime will be. As rumors begin circulating on an upcoming big Russian offensive, President Putin made a pivotal change in the command structure, elevating a young, hungry, and accomplished general who, if we are to believe the Ukrainians and the mainstream media, has come back from the dead. Colonel General Andrei Mordovyshev has been appointed the new commander-in-chief of Russian ground forces. He was a former commander of Center forces responsible for the conquest of Mariupol, Ivanko, and surrounding areas. His nomination is incredibly awkward for the Ukrainians and their cheerleaders in the West, who reported he was killed in a strike on an airfield. Well, didn't happen. Now, here's a very serious commentary. Chuck Baldwin. This guy actually is quite brilliant. It's not my war, Trump said on Air Force One back on April 25th. President Trump has said repeatedly the Ukraine war is Biden's war, not his. But now the Ukraine war belongs to Trump. He can no longer deny ownership. President Donald Trump admin has repeatedly approved its first weapons sale to Ukraine since the start of his second term, with plans to authorize direct commercial exports valued at $50 million or more. According to the report, the U.S. admin formally notified Congress April 30th of its intention to allow the sale of military goods to Ukraine under the direct commercial sales program. That's actually a report from a military defense blog. Meanwhile, then Chuck Baldwin says, by the same token, the Israeli genocide in Gaza is now Trump's genocide. This man who was elected president on the promise of ending America's stupid wars, his war, is neck deep in the continuation and escalation of these wars. Per Trump's wars on behalf of Israel comes this report. The Israeli military, is set to receive a major new weapon shipment from the U.S. in the coming weeks to prepare it for continued operation in Gaza and a potential attack on Iran, the Israeli news site INET reported Monday. Beyond that, Trump expanded the U.S. wars in the Middle East to include Yemen, after spending over $1 billion in bombs and Operation losing 3 F-18 Hornet fighters surrounding our attacks on the Houthis, with the result of doing nothing to dismantle their ability to continue launching missiles against Israel in defense of the Palestinian people, but killing scores of innocent Yemeni civilians. Our naval warships were forced to leave harm's way, giving Yemen a huge victory, utterly humiliating Trump and his neocon Zionists in D.C. Renowned international journalist Pepe Escobar explained the details of this humiliating defeat for Donald Trump's war in an interview with Judge Napolitano. Love it. Absolutely right. These wars are now Trump's wars. Meanwhile, now we have Israel beginning preparations for a new Gaza offensive, killing a mere 115 more. Here they have the report recap of major developments of the day. The Israeli military said extensive attacks on Palestinians over the past 24 hours are the initial moves of what's dubbed Operation Gideon's Chariots. The leaders of Ireland, Spain, Iceland, Luxembourg, Malta, Norway, and Slovenia called on Israel to halt its attacks on Gaza and allow humanitarian aid into the enclave, dubbing the situation a man-made catastrophe. The health ministry in Gaza reported at least 115 Palestinians killed in the Israeli attack since dawn today. NBC News reported. Trump is working on a potential plan, sending up to 1 million Palestinians displaced from Gaza to Libya. How insulting is that? Send Palestinians from Palestine to Libya? Libya used to be the most humane nation on earth, but thanks to Hillary Clinton, John Brennan, and Barack Obama, it was reduced to rubble and ashes. They now have open public slave trading. They sell slaves in Libya. So the Palestinians, you think, are going to be eager to go to Libya? Why do you think they've been fighting to save their own land? This is colossal stupidity. Meanwhile, report, Witkoff told mediators the U.S. won't force Israel to end the Gaza slaughter. Further proof these are Trump's wars. U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff has told their mediators the U.S. will not force Israel to end its genocidal war in the Gaza Strip, according to a report from the Times of Israel. The report cited Arab officials The Israeli PM Netanyahu is staunchly refusing to end military ops in Gaza, a position he's made clear in public comments as the Israeli military is preparing a major escalation. Remember, for Bibi, he wants them all dead or gone, dead or gone. And after all, this is Trump proposing to move 1 million to Libya. That's ethnic cleansing. That's a war crime. Is this guy still is so ignorant and naive he thinks he can commit war crimes and the world's not going to notice? I'm embarrassed. Here we have Rubio telling Netanyahu Trump is concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Right. All he's got to do is cut off the supplies. All he's got to do is tell Bibi to stop. All he's got to do is say, open up and give aid to the Palestinians. He's not doing it. Secretary of State Rubio informed PM Netanyahu Trump has become concerned about the Palestinians in Gaza. Oh, he's become concerned now? In March, Tel Aviv imposed a total blockade on all goods and aid entering the Strip, leading to widespread starvation. Axios reporter and IDF veteran Barak Ravid posted Thursday to X. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke by phone with PM Netanyahu and told him the Trump admin is concerned about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. What utter bullshit. We could stop it right away, immediately. We don't give a damn. That's just propaganda. That's just trying to make Trump look better. Here's a story about it. Embassy denies report a plan to send 1 million Palestinians to Libya. Believe me, it was real. The Donald Trump admin is attempting to bribe one of the warring parties in Libya. Well, here it is. To accept 1 million Palestinians, Israel is attempting to cleanse from Gaza. Libya became a failed state after the U.S.-led regime change war against longtime dictator Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. But he was a benevolent dictator. Even Aristotle acknowledged a benevolent dictator is the most efficient form of government because he's benevolent. The problem is most dictators are not. Gaddafi was the exception. So now the U.S. Embassy is trying to deny it? How ridiculous is that? Meanwhile, we have photographs of the way Palestine was before the NABCA, before the Israelis, the Jews arrived in Palestine. I mean, it was a wonderful, beautiful country, just absolutely, virtually breathtakingly beautiful. Meanwhile, Israel bombs a major Yemeni port, right? U.S. exits after 1,000 bombing attacks, Israel enters. More than a dozen Israeli warplanes launched airstrikes on two major ports in Yemen Friday, according to Israeli and Yemeni officials. The IDF issued evacuation notices for 3 areas of Yemen last week, threatening retaliation to Houthi missile and drone attacks. The Houthis are going to unleash more, mark my words. The IDF announced a strike Friday, saying 15 fighter jets dropped more than 30 munitions. We'll be right back.
Production will be second to none. And of course, Henry the Horse dances the waltz. Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been. Lives in a dream, waits at the window, wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door. Who is it for? All the lonely people. Where do they all come from? All the lonely people.
Well, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, says it's going to invest $1.4 trillion in the U.S. over the next 10 years. We'll see how all that plays out. Trump seemed to be pretty good at putting together money deals. Al-Qaeda affiliate claims 200 soldiers killed in Burkina Faso attack. This is an Al-Qaeda affiliate has claimed it has killed 200 soldiers in an attack on a Burkina Faso army base this week, according to an NGO tracking the armed group's online activities. The base in the northern town of Djibouti came under attack Sunday morning. A police state and market were also targeted, security sources told the news agency Reuters. Though there was no official death toll, 3 Djibouti residents told Reuters dozens of soldiers and civilians were dead. Yes. Meanwhile, Sudan's shadow war, drone strikes reveal escalating tensions between the United Arab Emirates and Turkey. Airstrikes in Nalia and then Port Sudan show Ankara and Abu Dhabi on opposing side of Sudan's war. Recent drone strikes in Sudan have revealed an escalating rivalry between the United Arab Emirates and Turkey, backing opposite sides in a war that's been raging since April of 2023. Officials in Sudan's army-based government have been watching the paramilitary rapid support forces flying military cargo planes in and out of Nalia Airport in South Darfur for months. The Sudanese armed forces targeted the airport on multiple occasions, suspecting the UAE through its network of air bases in the region, including one in Uganda and one in Somalia's autonomous Puntland, was using it to supply the RSF with sophisticated weapons, armed drones, and ammunition. Meanwhile, India says its troops killed 31 Maoist rebels in a week-long battle. The 21-day operation was part of India's offense against the last remaining groups of the Naxalite rebellion. Indian security forces have killed 31 Maoist rebels in what the country's Home Minister called the biggest operation against Naxalism. Amit Shah said on social media the operation took place on Karguta Hill in the border of Chhattisgarh and Telangana. The hill on the Red Terror, the hill on which the Red Terror once reigned. Today, the tricolor is flying proudly. That would be the Indian flag. Our security forces completed this biggest anti-Naxal operation in just 21 days. Meanwhile, the nuclear launch missile sites buried under Greenland's ice are revealed. Camp Century, part of a secret Pentagon plan called Project Iceworm, was designed in the late 1950s as a hidden network of nuclear missile launch sites beneath Greenland's ice. Built in 1959, abandoned in 1967 due to unstable ice, the facility was meant to store 600 medium-range ballistic missiles. Today it lies buried under at least 100 feet of ice, according to the Wall Street Journal, which wrote a lengthy piece about the sites this week. Though presented as a research station, its real military purpose remained classified until 1996. Nita Erlieva explained. The first licenses have been received for the creation of oil storage facilities. This is also an unusual case. Russia has never had oil storage facilities. More going on there. Curious. I wonder if this has anything to do with Trump's declared interest in taking, well, actually, it's Greenland. It's under Greenland's ice. Meanwhile, Walmart's China sourcing crushed by Trump tariffs as rival Metro laughs. This is Yosuchi Shimatsu writes for Rents. The self-inflicted demise of Walmart's supply chain in China has at last arrived as Trump import tariffs start to bite into profit margins and annihilate the superstore's long-standing scam to evade U.S. taxes by concentrating nearly all its product orders in a ruthless strategy to exploit the rock-bottom cheapo Chinese labor. The legendary founder of that ubiquitous chain of box stores, the late Sam Walton, began Walmart's rise in the state of Arkansas.
I need somebody help, not just anybody help. You know I need someone help. Well, when I was younger, so much younger than today, I never needed anybody's help in any way. But now these days are gone, I'm not so self-assured. Now I find I've changed my mind and open up the doors.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Changed. A crowd of people stood and stared. They'd seen his face before. Nobody was really sure if he was from the House of Lords. I saw a film today, oh boy. The English army had just won the war. Crowd of people turned away, but I just had to.
Trump tells Walmart to eat the tariffs after the retailer warned it'll have to raise prices. What else could it do? President Trump blasted Walmart Saturday after the country's largest retailer warned this week it'll have to raise prices because of tariffs. Walmart should stop trying to blame tariffs as a reason for raising prices throughout the chain, Trump wrote on Truth Social. Between Walmart and China, they should, as is said, eat the tariffs and not charge valued customers anything. I'll be watching, and so will your customers. Frankly, that's an absurd stance to take. I can't believe Trump would do that. As a businessman, he knows better. Meanwhile, global geopolitics and declining U.S. power, how China is winning the U.S.-China economic war, a bluff that failed. Donald Trump's trade war, particularly targeting China, was rooted in a flawed bluff by imposing unilateral tariffs and threatening global trade as a zero-sum game. That means whatever I win, you lose. There's only so much available. So Trump plays a lot of politics that way. U.S. President Trump sought to intimidate countries into economic submission. Aaron Tangent points out the president's strategy mirrored a schoolyard bully demanding tribute, hoping to create a world where America was a central hub and all other nations acted as dependent spokes. However, the transparency of trade data meant that other nations could clearly see the U.S. had no royal flush and called its bluff. Yes, I think that's right. And here's another manifestation. Very serious, Hal Turner. U.S. credit rating downgraded first time in history. When the Republican-controlled Congress voted down President Trump's big, beautiful bill in committee today, the effect was immediate. Moody's just downgraded the U.S. credit rating for the first time in history. The reason? An unsustainable path for U.S. federal debt and its resulting interest burden. Moody's notes that the U.S. debt to GDP ratio is on track to hit 134% by 2035. Federal interest payments are set to equal around 30% of revenue by 2035, up from around 18% in 2025 and 9% back in 2021. Furthermore, deficit spending is now at World War II levels as a percentage of GDP. Get that. Meanwhile, nevertheless, U.S. has spent $1 trillion on nuclear weapons over the next decade. That's just what we need. According to the Congressional Budget Office, Washington will spend $1 trillion from 2025 to 2034 modernizing and operating America's strategic arsenal. If carried out, DODs and DOEs plan to operate, sustain, and modernize current nuclear forces and purchase new forces would cost a total of $946 billion over the 2025 to 34 period, or an average of about $95 billion a year, the CBO estimates. The spending includes $357 billion on operating nuclear weapons and delivery system, $460 on modernization, and $130 in expected cost overruns. Yes, indeed, no doubt. Meanwhile, SCOTUS blocks Trump's bid to resume swift deportations under the Alien Enemies Act. This is an ongoing issue. The Supreme Court Friday ruled 7-2 against Trump admin attempt to swiftly deport Venezuelan gang members under the Alien Enemies Act, requiring officials to provide more than 24 hours for detainees to challenge their removal. Under these circumstances, notice roughly 24 hours before removal, devoid of information about how to exercise due process rights to contest that removal, surely does not pass muster, a majority said. Meanwhile, how war propaganda has affected American foreign policy for a century, Ryan McMakin writes. New York Times this week reports that Trump admin has canceled many grants that were to fund research on misinformation. This is being presented by the media as a dastardly deed that was supposedly allowed to spread a misleading or false information through various media channels. Of course, if there were any genuine interest in studying the most egregious efforts to spread misinformation, media outlets like the Times would study themselves and their friends and the regime. After all, few organizations have been more complicit than the national American media and U.S. foreign policy establishment when it comes to spending much of the worst propaganda in American history. I say worst because the propaganda has often been used in service to the worst ends to gin up support for a variety of wars, resulting in the deaths of thousands, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of innocents. I dare say the numbers in the millions, without any doubt, in the millions. Meanwhile, Trump acknowledges Hasidic Judaism false messiah, Menachem Mendel Schneerson calls him king. Now, this is back on February 22nd, but I had it reemphasized because it indicates Trump's dedication to Zionism. This is a guy many thought was the Mashiach, the Jewish Messiah on earth, which he denied by observing he can't be the Mashiach because there's still Christians alive on earth. On the eve of the 22nd Shabbat, Donald Trump congratulated the Rebbe King Moshiach with a proclamation, "Long live the King." This is pretty disturbing stuff. Apparently, he congratulated the Rebbe King Moshiach with a proclamation. Yes, long live the king. What can I say about that? I gave a talk about Rabbi Schneerson during my Volkswagen Conspiracy Conference this past December. You can find it online on my blog. Go to jameshfetzer.org to events and check it out. Meanwhile, Christian Zionism, the most dangerous belief in America. I agree.
The number one
here we have a report about it. I do think it's extremely troubling.
Evangelical Christianity is how here in the United States, the narrative that is most often touted amongst the religious pastors, amongst the church leaders, is how these harmful ideologies end up harming others outside of the Christian church itself, right? So yes, I was raised as a Christian, and it was unhealthy for me. It held me back in a lot of ways. It was very harmful in that way. But in the end, I think the most sinister part about my upbringing was being told as a child, as a middle schooler, as a high schooler, to proudly proclaim myself as a Zionist. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. Because Christian Zionism is, I think, one of the most understood, or the most misunderstood, and one of the most brushed over aspects of evangelical Christianity, but it's also one of the most influential in the sense that it is shaping both American Christianity and United States foreign policy. And I talk about this a lot because I think it is super important. And again, this is not a reflection of how I think that everyday Christians are somehow more responsible for the occupying apartheid state of the state of Israel in relation to the ethnic cleansing that is being attempted regarding the Palestinians. I think everyone in the United States is complicit in a lot of different ways. But the institution and the ideology of Christianity is being used to justify, I think, in a lot of ways, the expenditure of tax dollars to support the statehood of Israel at all costs. And particularly encouraging the evangelical voting bloc to vote for leaders who support the statehood of Israel at all costs, even genocidal costs. Because at its core, Christian Zionism is, just for a brief summary, it's the biblical prophecy that Christians have and how they have a religious obligation to support the Israeli government unconditionally in order to fulfill that prophecy, in order to bring about the end times. I talk about this a lot on my channel as well, about how when I was raised in the evangelical Christian church, the end times were talked about a lot. I got a lot of sermons, a lot of lectures in Bible class about Armageddon and the book of Revelation. And without fail, that always does bring up the question of the statehood of Israel, okay? And what I want to talk about today is how it's not just theology. That's how it was framed for me growing up in that environment. I was told that this is just part of God's plan and it's something that we have to take seriously, etc. But it's also, it manifests through, maybe not myself as a middle schooler, but as an adult who, for adults who vote, it becomes a geopolitical conversation, right? Because the consequences of this belief system go far beyond the church walls, the Bible-based private school that I went to.
She's, of course, got it right. I mean, that's my point, too. You can believe whatever you want. It's when you act on your beliefs. And these are beliefs that are empirically, scientifically, objectively untestable. You can neither prove nor disprove even the existence of God. It's beyond scientific inquiry, which is why every rabbi, every minister, every priest agrees these are articles of faith. These are things you believe on faith, regardless of the evidence, regardless of whether you can justify them or not. Meanwhile, Mike Stone says, asks the question, are you insane? Both of these steps, accepting the reality that truth exists and living a totally truthful life, are necessary if you wish to remain sane in an insane world. Granting, these aren't easy steps to take, but isn't your sanity worth it? And stop jerking off to porn, says Mike Stone. Are you deaf, mentally ill, or downright insane? If you reply, the world is insane, everyone I know is insane, the air is poisoned with chemtrails, our water is laced with fluoride, our food is unfit for human consumption, we're being bombarded by EMFs, I'm surrounded by ignorant, stupid peasants everywhere I go. So yeah, maybe some of that has rubbed off on me. Maybe I am a little insane. Then you're most certainly not insane. In fact, you might be the sanest person on the planet. But how many people like that do you know? I'm guessing none. I bet even more money. Almost everyone you know is suffering from insanity to one degree or another. Look at what we all just went through. When a tiny number of sane people tried to convince the last number of insane people that the stupid 19 virus was nothing more than an enormous hoax, they were violently shouted down by hundreds of millions of mentally ill nitwits who insisted it was real. Then, those mentally ill nitwits proved how fully insane they were by injecting themselves with poison. Many of them are now dead because of it. Others are crippled. Every single one of them, both living and dead, if the dead could talk, regrets their decision. Meanwhile, not a single person in the opposite camp regrets their decision not to inject themselves with poison. So you see, it pays to maintain some semblance of sanity. But how does one do that? How does one remain sane in an insane world? I found there are two vital steps a person must take in order to do so. The first is to acknowledge that truth exists, to know that there is only truth or the absence, nothing in between. Either germs cause disease or they don't. They don't. Either the pandemic was real or it wasn't. It wasn't. Either men have walked on the moon or they haven't. They haven't. And so it goes. A person's opinion on the matter means nothing. Only what is true or untrue. Because there is only truth or the absence of it. There's only one answer to every question and one way to conduct yourself in every situation, the truthful way. Very few people are willing to accept the reality truth exists. They're afraid to do so because truth frightens them. It goes against their programming, brainwashing. So they pretend that truth doesn't exist. They prefer the Wikipedia version of reality, where anyone can say anything, report anything, and call it true. While I can understand why people like that, people are cowards, it still amazes me. And it speaks to the utter stupidity and almost complete feminization of modern men. However, if you want to remain sane in an insane world, the first step is acknowledging that truth exists. The second, commit to living a totally truthful life. Make your every thought, action, and word come from a place of absolute truth. I like it. I like it a lot. And I've heard from more than one source on various occasions how my shows were contributing to their sanity, to know that they weren't mistaken in beliefs they had. They were not finding reinforced by the mainstream media, which was propagating nothing but lies. So I think that shows like this perform more than one valuable function. Stand by.
So many different coffees that were so good. And every time I came back to the U.S., I was so disappointed with the coffee, so I figured that I had to do something about it. The biggest difference is on the beans and the roasting process, how we roast it, and how fresh it is. The fresher the roast, the better the quality. Here I have like all of the coffee. It's roasted within 1 to 2 days prior to being shipped. So it literally gets to consumers' house within 3 to 5 days after being roasted. If you like coffee, you have to try ours. It's fresh roasted. It's one of the best beans that we can get, and you will definitely see the difference.
Visit blackoutcoffee.com and use the coupon code REPUB10. That's REPUB10.
Have you ever planted a tree for your home garden, orchard, or farm? Well, you'll know how frustrating it is when deer don't stop nibbling at them and you lose years of growth. We have a very economic solution called Tree Savers. It's basically a greenhouse tube at a very economical price. Most of the tubes are $3 to $4, depending on the length that you want. Very easy installation. Check us out at FURION.com. Furious Growth, that's FURION.com. Susanna's Secret Real Essential Oils of Nature would like to thank you and RBN listeners for your previous purchases. We're announcing that we have a new waterless diffuser in stock with a full 1-year warranty. You just insert the bottle to the top, screw it in, tip it upside down, set your timer, or it's also motion activated at FURION.com. That's FURION.com.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good.
For this moment to rise. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and let it fly. All your life.
Meanwhile, audio of Biden's special counsel interview is out, and it's painful to listen to. I have no doubt about it. Audio of former special counsel Robert Hur's interview with former President Joe Biden is out, showing the extent to which Biden struggled to recall simple facts. The news outlet Axios obtained the audio of Hur's interview with Biden, which took place in October of 2023. The recordings were taken over 2 3-hour interview sessions recorded on October 8th and 9th. In one audio, Biden struggles to recall the year his son Beau died of brain cancer on May 30th, 2015 at the age of 46. The audio shows Biden could remember the month and day, but struggled to recall the year, and still he was prompted by members of the special counsel's team. Biden also gets a year wrong. President Trump was elected to his first term. He confuses the year Trump was elected, 2016, with the year he entered office, and Biden leaves as vice presidency 2017. Biden is repeatedly prompted to clarify when he left office and Trump entered the White House. As the clip continues, Biden backtracks, appears to repeat himself, and misstates the year of Beau's death again after being told the correct year. Biden struggles to spin more than a handful of words together at a time before he pauses again, appearing to be trying to recollect his thoughts at several moments. Biden drops off midway through his sentence with a muttered, anyway. Meanwhile, final story. If ignorance is bliss, the United States is the happiest superpower. Knowledge is power. The key to knowledge is literacy of the population. I'll put the bottom line up front. Compared with Russia and China, the United States is a relatively illiterate country. This has profound implications for the future of the United States in its quest to remain the hegemon. Let me give you 3 historical markers: 1925, 1955, and 2024. Can you spot the trend? In 1925, literacy rate in China was low, around 15%. In the Soviet Union, 40 to 50. In the U.S., 90 to 95. In 1955, literacy rate in China had gone to 20 to 28. In the Soviet Union, 98. In the U.S., around 97%. By 2024,